We need an intervention for the American press corps. Maybe not, because I'm actually convinced that they're helping Republicans. Now, unwittingly, unknowingly, they're helping Republicans. Even though they're out to get the GOP, they're helping Republicans. Here's what's going on here. For a number of years in the media, they took a position that they should be objective. They should just give us the facts. No editorializing, no opinionating. Well, as younger people have moved in and we've hit postmodern times, it's your truth and my truth. And all the reporters, the young reporters coming out of journalism school they know they're biased, they know they're progressive, and they really hate conservatives. And they want to be able to editorialize in their reporting. And some newsrooms are allowing them to do this. Clearly CNN is, clearly the New York Times is, clearly MSNBC is. And so the young news people are holding their employers hostage to their whims and their worldview, and they're issuing reports with a very, very willfully intentional bias against conservatives, against Christians, against Republicans, against the non-woke of America. It just happens to turn out that most Americans tend to be center-right in their worldview. We are actually a more progressive nation than a lot of conservatives like to admit, but fundamentally, institutionally, when it comes to family and jobs, overwhelmingly, Americans have a slight shift towards the right, more hostile to these reporters. And a lot of these reporters have a worldview that is closer to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez than to the moderate Democrats. Consequently, they skew their reports in that direction, and increasingly, they are destroying the credibility of the American press corps itself. As a result, more and more Americans surveyed show they have less and less trust in the media. And it's not just Republicans, it's Democrats and independents as well. And as a result, new media operations are springing up because the press corps has shown themselves to be so biased that they cannot be trusted. And because they cannot be trusted, Americans are going with something they can trust. Now, the result here, the importance here, is that the people who are leaving the mainstream media, they often go down rabbit holes of conspiracy theorists who they build up trust with online. They go to people who tell them what they want to hear. The media, you need to understand this, your average voice now on CNN, on MSNBC, and the New York Times, the Washington Post, they're not giving you the truth. Some of them are, and they deserve credit. Jake Tapper, I think, deserves a lot of credit. John King deserves a lot of credit at CNN. Wolf Blitzer, too, I think, understands that he's got to give you reporting that is actually truthful, honest, and directed. Now, the editors and producers behind the scenes may tell them, focus on these stories. This is what the viewer cares about. And those viewers care about left-wing things, and that's where they cover. But I think they try to play it straight. But then you've got the Chris Cuomos and you've got the Don Lemons of the world. You've got others there who they don't care. They are trying to placate a progressive audience with a progressive worldview. They're trying to compete with MSNBC at CNN. At MSNBC, they don't care about the facts. At MSNBC, their job is to give you the progressive narrative. At MSNBC, they are the apologists of and fluffers for the Democratic Party. If you want to know what the Democrats truly believe, you turn on MSNBC. The New York Times, the Washington Post, a lot of reporters out there. A lot of reporters at newer startups. They are progressive activists masquerading as journalists. And consequently, the American trust in the media has collapsed, has cratered. When you see something like Joe Biden saying what he said about Satchel Paige, I've played you the audio now 4 times. You can hear for yourself he said what he said about Satchel Paige, and yet you've got reporters out there saying, he didn't say that. I don't know what you think, but he didn't say that. But he did. You could hear it for yourself. Now, he misspoke. He stumbled over his words. He did not mean to say it, but he said it. If it was Donald Trump who stumbled over his words, they would attribute it to Donald Trump, and you and I know it. Donald Trump typed out Kofifi on Twitter, and it was a multi-day news story. The American Press Corps needs an intervention. The American Press Corps has picked a side. And as they've picked a side, trust in the press has collapsed. Now, here's the problem. The American public and our republic requires a free and fair press. Democracy is very hard to maintain. It is essentially modern Western representative democracy is very hard. It is not the default. The default is a cult of personality surrounding a tyrant. The very thing the left says they fear with Donald Trump. In order to avoid that, you have to have a free and fair press. You have to have a free and fair press that doesn't pick a side. Because if it picks a side, the people who aren't on that side are going to revolt and go find their own voices who affirm the world as they see them. And the press has picked a side. As a result, it is not a coincidence that as there is a perception of the decline of freedom in this country, it comes as the press has picked a side. And the press has actually picked a side that is historically far more authoritarian than conservatives. The great monstrous barbarians of the world almost always come from the left because they have no fear of hell because they do not believe in it. And so they bring us hell on earth in the name of bringing us heaven on earth, whether it's Hitler or Mao or Mussolini or Stalin or Lenin. Now, I know they will say, well, some of these are right-wing, but no, they were socialists. The Nazis were National Socialists. Progressives may do a lot of trying to rearrange history to claim they were some sort of right-wing authoritarian front, but actually, they're the kissing cousins of the communists. Regardless of how you want to place them on the ideological map, the fact of the matter is the press has picked a side. And it is not a coincidence that the perception of freedom in this country collapses as the press picks a side and advocates that side's position and claims that side is always and forever right and has a willing, open, hostile bias to anyone who disagrees with that side. What used to be latent is now patent and obvious for everyone. And they need an intervention. Because the press's shift to the left, open and notorious shift to the left, is part of why in this country we have seen now an explosion of conspiracies. We have seen now an explosion of alternate news sources, many of which are not actually very good with a lot of fringe opinions. But they are people who recognize that the American media has gone so far left, they want to go find something that comports to their worldview. They don't want to have in-your-face progressivism all the time, and that's what they're getting now. You watch most shows on CNN, you watch all of MSNBC, you read the New York Times front page or most major news outlets in the country, including USA Today. You're going to get a progressive worldview on the front page. You're going to get the stories that a bunch of progressives care about. You're going to get the spin that a bunch of progressives care about. You watch NBC News at night. You listen to NBC News. You follow along on the website. They are out to get conservatives. You can see it in the bias of how they're covering the Kyle Rittenhouse matter. Interestingly enough, you can see it in how they're not covering the Ahmaud Arbery situation. You got a bunch of white progressives trying to feel good about themselves by being out to get Kyle Rittenhouse. They're completely ignoring this tragedy in Glenn County, Georgia. Because it's a bunch of rich white wokes who are shaping the news, guiding the news, focusing the news, reading the news, consuming the news, and that's who they're going after. They have found a consumer they want, and it's not you, and it's not me. And they're shaping the news to conform to the biases of those people. And we will continue to get greater press bias, and we will also get greater loss of freedom in this country as the progressives and the media all head in the same direction. And by the way, our loss of freedom isn't going to come from Donald Trump. It's not going to come from the conservatives. It's not going to come from the Republicans. It's going to come from the progressives who, with the media in tow, decide that it's the conservatives who are letting the planet burn and must be stopped. It's the conservatives who are the threats to democracy and must be stopped. It's the conservatives who are the bad guys and must be stopped. And it's all because the media amplifies their own message internally, and they have no external information to pierce their bubble to tell them they're not right. And it ends badly for all of us. But for the short term, ironically, it actually ends worse for them than anyone else, because the American people are rejecting all of that very quickly, and they don't even see it happening because there's no counter programming for them to consume to show them what's really going on out there in flyover country.
I really do like his